Welcome to The Big Picture, a show that takes a deep dive into the political landscape of not only America, but right here in our own backyard of Illinois.
It's showtime, folks.
The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. Another beautiful day here. I keep saying that. It's amazing. Anyway, today I want to spend a bit of time at the beginning, a little more than usual, talking to you about the attack that happened in Iran. I mean, Donald Trump took an extraordinary victory tour last week, claiming to have, saved the world from an Iranian nuclear weapon and bringing about a new era of peace. Look, the facts tell a different story. A story of extraordinary egotism and abuse of power by Trump, but also a story of successful Israeli espionage, diplomacy, and military strategy. But it's going to take a while to explain this, and it's important, so bear with me. Iran's nuclear ambitions aren't new. To counter them, back in 2015, Barack Obama negotiated something called the JCPA. You don't need to know what it stands for, to stop Iran from enriching uranium. The deal was, never elevated to become a treaty because Republicans would not have passed it in the Senate. Now, it's not like they had a better idea. They just wanted to claim that Obama was making a bad deal. They were joined in that by Bibi Netanyahu, who has long sought to draw the U.S. into military conflict with Iran. Now, the deal, the JCPA, according to experts at the Center for Arms Control and Nuclear Proliferation, worked. Before it was signed, Iran was 2 to 3 months from developing a bomb. It had 11,000 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 20%. After the deal, and as long as it was in place, Iran was never within a year of bomb-making capability and had just 300 kilograms of uranium enriched to 3.67%. Before the deal, there was very limited cooperation with international inspections. During the deal, there was unprecedented access. Netanyahu was furious. Iran, after all, was building proxy armies all around Israel. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis all received support and arms from Iran. Lebanon and Syria were destabilized and their hostility towards Israel encouraged. But without a nuclear threat, the West wouldn't be eager to engage in another Mideast war. Despite all the evidence and the records from the international community, Netanyahu never stopped claiming Iran was close to getting a bomb because he wanted us in that fight. And he found an ally in Donald Trump. Ally or dupe, right? Trump claimed that Obama was a fool and tore up the JPCA. Trump promised he would negotiate a better deal, but he failed. And after he pulled us out of that deal, Iran's path to a bomb closed again to about a couple of weeks. By November of 2024, they had roughly 6,605 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%. And international inspectors had very limited access to verify any of this. Well, at the time Obama negotiated the JCPA back in 2015, he needed some insurance. After all, the Iranian regime is all the things Bibi Netanyahu claimed it was, a sponsor of terrorism with dreams of empire stretching from India to the Mediterranean. So Obama ordered the Defense Department to come up with a way of stopping Iran from getting a bomb if it cheated on the deal. And the result of that work was the strategy, the tactical planning, and the weaponry, yes, those 30,000-pound bombs, to destroy the facility at Fordo. So when Trump ordered his strike this week, he was greenlighting planning, intelligence, training, and weaponry, all developed by Obama. The men and women who did the work, trained for years, they carried out this mission last week. They did their jobs and they did them well. But was it necessary? Right? All this work was somebody else's work. The only question the president had, the only thing that's a reflection of his capability, is did he make the right decision? Was it necessary? Now, it's true, Iran had grown closer to producing a nuclear weapon. And that's partly his fault, but they had grown. But you know what? The progress ended before Trump ordered the attack. And that's really important. Look, after weakening Iran's proxies during the long war since the Hamas attack on October 7th, Israel found itself for the first time in a far stronger place than Iran. The balance of power had changed. After Iran launched ballistic missiles at Israel, a big escalation in the war, Israel and the U.S. shot them down. Then Israel counterattacked and destroyed Iranian air defenses. Iran was, for the first time, vulnerable. So Israel decided to attack, ostensibly to take out Iran's nuclear capabilities, not for regime change, right? The ones that grew after we abandoned the JCPA. And Israel was successful. On June 16th, Bibi Netanyahu told the world that Israel had set back Iran's nuclear program, and I'm quoting here, a very long, long time. We have no reason to doubt the veracity of that claim. Israeli intelligence had penetrated the regime at all levels. In just days, Israel had killed the scientists leading the nuclear bomb-making effort. They had degraded centrifuges everywhere, but they hadn't been able to get to the underground facility at Fordo. But they might have degraded those too through sabotage. We just don't know. At any rate, he said on June 16th, he told the world they have set back Iran's nuclear program for a very, very long time. And that brings us to Trump's decision to attack Iran, to bring us into the war to attack Iran. Because Israel announced that the Iranian nuclear program had been set back. That announcement was June 16th. And Trump's order to attack 6 days later was on June 22nd. Why did he attack when he did? 6 days after Israel's efforts had accomplished the mission. And remember, Trump was briefed by American intelligence officials that Iran wasn't making a bomb, and Israel said they'd successfully set back any bomb-making program. So why did he do it? If the president had consulted Congress, he would have had to explain his reasons and subject him to questioning. But empowered by the Supreme Court and by a supine Congress, as no president ever has been, he just skipped that step. So it's up to us to make this judgment, and we have to look at the evidence. And the evidence is, well, look, it should be unthinkable that a president would launch an attack like that for any reason other than to achieve a military objective. But we know that objective was met before we attacked, before he made the decision to attack, because he told us he's going to make that decision at the very last minute, 6 days after the mission was achieved. And you know what? Trump knew the mission was achieved. The objective was met before he ordered the strike. How do we know that? Because how else could he announce to the world that the Iran's bomb-making program was obliterated even before the bomb damage assessment had begun? He couldn't, but in fact, the Israeli assessment was over. We had set them back. They had been set back by the Israelis before he pulled the trigger. So now we have to confront the fact that Donald Trump had other motives for sending our troops halfway around the world in a military attack. Was it that Mr. Trump just couldn't stand the idea of Israel winning a war without him? Well, was it that his flagging poll numbers called out for a bold move? Did he desperately want to change the subject from his domestic war, the one where he sent the Marines to pacify Los Angeles only to be shut out by the Dodgers? Did he hope finally to to hide behind our brave troops despite calling them suckers and losers? I don't know. Or was it that he wanted to go into the last weeks of negotiating the reconciliation bill looking like a conquering hero? Those reasons, all of them, are more compelling than the lie he told us. Launching an unprecedented bombing attack using our most fearsome weapons on a country we're not at war with, a country we are in the middle of negotiating with, draws a higher level of scrutiny than Trump is used to getting. This time, most Americans didn't just listen to the talking points. This time, reporters, even Fox, asked questions, and they refused to be bullied, and they demanded facts. Trump's errors in judgment encouraged by Netanyahu, opened the door to Iranian nuclear ambitions. Israel successfully set those ambitions back in a wave of attacks. 6 days later, after success was declared, Trump ordered the U.S. to attack. Confronted with these facts, a panicked Trump hid behind our troops, slandered reporters, and begged for a Nobel Peace Prize. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court is busy giving this man more power. And Congress is rushing to pass the worst piece of legislation since the Fugitive Slave Act. Look, if you don't like this stuff, stop it. Don't let them turn Project 2025 into law. Don't let them create a corrupt oligarchy of billionaires at the expense of our health, our prosperity, and our very freedom. Light up those phone lines this week, today, because they're going to vote today. Call like now. I don't care if you don't listen to the rest of the show. Call now and tell your elected officials that they will go down in flames if they pass this terrible bill. I have a great show for you. So after you're finished calling your congressperson, come back. We have great guests, and we're going to talk about what we do about all of this. Stay tuned.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, welcome back, and and thank you for sticking with me through that long explanation. All right, here we are gearing up for another round of elections, and the stakes couldn't be clearer. All the things that we said were going to come to pass before the last election have come to pass. And that means, our lives are worse and our country is less safe and we're going to be less healthy. But it also means our democracy is weaker. It means the other guys have done more to put in place capabilities that will keep them in power, from gerrymandering to changing the rules about voting. Winning this time will be harder than it was last time. This time, a lawless president intends to claim fraud whenever it suits him and use all the power he has to make sure winners from blue districts aren't seated. This time, our elections play out in districts according to rules set by an anti-democratic and captured Supreme Court. But unlike last time, Americans have seen the chaos for themselves, the hate, the incompetence, the corruption, the baseness of this administration. And as always, as we get ready to talk about elections, I turn to leaders and to folks who lead organizations that go where the political parties don't go, creating pathways for tens of thousands of Americans who want to move the country forward. And one of my favorite of these groups is Swing Left. And today I'm joined by Tomas Gusterman, who is their national political director. And he came to Swing Left after serving in the Biden administration, I think both at SBA and the Department of State. Tomas, is that right?
That is correct.
Well, welcome. And I'm glad you've joined such a fabulous organization.
Thank you. And thank you for having me and for talking to me today.
Hey, I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Is this better now?
Yeah, it is. Thank you. All right. So, Tomas, my friend Yasmin Rajdi has been on the show a bunch of times. I think she does a great job. And she was recently quoted in a piece in The Atlantic. I just want to, it was June 9th in a Russell Berman piece. Can I just read you a little bit of it, and I want to talk about it with you?
Yes, please.
It says, Yasmin Rajdi, the executive director of Vote Forward and its progressive campaign arm, Swing Left, is trying to change that culture. Just as Democrats are now debating, sometimes fiercely, why their party's message failed last year, Rajdi believes that to emerge from the political wilderness, they need to have candid conversations about their organizing and turnout efforts. Raji has been frustrated by what she describes as Democrats' lack of introspection and transparency. For months, she's been asking party organizers and consultants what they learned in 2024 and what they're going to do differently going forward. We've got to actually be honest about both works and what doesn't work, she told me. In the next election, if we are serving volunteers, donors, and voters reheated leftovers from 2024, we are doing it wrong. So I was going to ask you that question myself, but since she asked, what have Swing Left learned? What worked, what didn't work, and what are you going to do differently?
That's a great question, Edwin, and thank you again for having me. So, it's been 8 months since the November election, and as Yasmin said in that piece, it really feels like our party is doing more reshuffling of deck chairs and engaging in honest, good faith conversation about what works, what didn't work, and what needs to change. We at Swing Left feel clear-eyed that for Democrats to win majorities in 2025, 2026, and beyond, we have to do more than simply repeat past playbooks. We need to analyze and be brutally honest about what works, what doesn't, and how our strategy needs to evolve from here. And the world has changed. The path back to Democratic control will require new tactics, new messaging, new energy that is combined with old school organizing tactics that are proven to work. And so to answer your question, what we're doing at Swing Left and Vote Forward is we're really doubling down on the long-term people-powered organizing tactics proven to work, and we're introducing improvements and innovations to our voter contact and fundraising activities that will provide folks listening to this show the opportunity to channel their time and energy to the races and to civic actions that can move the needle and make a difference.
Well, let's be a little specific. Like, what did you do last time that you aren't going to do this time?
So, I think in that piece in The Atlantic, Yasmin talks about some of the work that Vote Forward is doing and Vote Forward did. And so, we recently released a new research where we were very transparent and candid about what worked last cycle and what did not work, and how we're going to be piloting new tactics in order to better meet voters and better communicate with voters and with new audiences. And so we are going to have new, for example, relational organizing tactics that use SMS and other remote contact tools. We're going to be doing more person-to-person digital organizing. And then we're also going to be doing different kinds of distributed canvassing that is focused on relational tactics that train and support volunteers to lead their own canvasses in an effective way. What we will continue to do, and I think this is really important for your listeners, is we are going to continue to organize early, often, and robustly, and with a keen focus on congressional districts that we can flip in order to win back the House. And so one of the things, for example, that we're doing is expanding our organizing infrastructure in places like Iowa. We previously have not done a ton of work in Iowa. This cycle, we are already standing up new group, volunteer-led groups in Iowa's 1st Congressional District and Iowa's 3rd Congressional District, which are prime for flipping. And so, those are some specific ways we are innovating and rolling out new tactics, but also being really clear that the work of organizing continues and it starts now.
Yeah. Are you still going to do letter writing campaigns? Yes, we will still be doing letter writing. Okay.
And I want to be clear that the go ahead.
No, after you.
I want to be clear that our takeaway in 2024 letter writing results shows that letter writing is still an effective way to drive voter turnout, but also we need to be increasingly strategic and innovative in how and when we use it and who we're trying to reach with it. And so we will continue to use that tactic and build on it in a rigorous and transparent and evidence-based way.
All right. Because as I read some of the data, I think letter writing can be effective, but it has to be done targeted differently than we did in the past.
Right. And we agree, and that is what we are going to be doing this cycle and moving forward is adapting and refining our targeting in order to better reach the audiences.
Yep. I think the whole country's been a little frustrated with the post-election response from Democrats. I don't know if that's completely fair because I think there has been quite a bit of looking at the data. And later in the show, I'm going to talk to Tom Bonnier, who's done a ton of that from Target Smart. And by the way, if there are questions you think I should ask him, I'm happy to pose them because Tom is, he's one of the best data guys on our side. But it's hard to articulate what we've learned when when no one is considered the leader of our party, right? We don't have, somebody. We have governors, but at the national level, the Republicans control the House and the Senate and the White House, so it's very hard to know who's speaking on behalf of what we've learned. And the lack of a primary in the last cycle, let Trump get most of the attention. Took away months really from us. So I'm not sure it's only tactics that we need to change, but let's talk about some of those. You got a method. You've looked at the data. You're pretty sure your method is meets the moment we're in, provided we can give you good candidates. So let's talk about some of those districts. In one of your strategies, you sent out a mailing recently that focuses on, the districts that are flippable on the abortion message. And I think you laid out 5 districts there that were all you thought flippable in Arizona, Colorado, Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Virginia. Do you want to sort of tell people a little about those races?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And just to take one step back, Swing Left's mission is really simple. We make it easy for people like your listeners to channel their time and energy, a combination thereof, toward the most competitive elections to help Democrats win a lever of governing power. And for us this cycle, winning back the House is our top electoral priority because that gives us the best chance of putting a check on Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we released our strategy in April and a campaign called 3 to Win because we only need to gain 3 seats in the House in order to have a Democratic House majority. And we released 25 initial targets, that is 10 Democrats we need to reelect, and 15 Republicans we need to defeat. And a lot of these Republicans are in an extremely close race. They're extremely vulnerable. I should note that just last night we learned that in Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, Congressman Don Bacon announced he's retiring.
Right.
And that is a district that Vice President Harris won, but that also elected a Republican member of Congress. And so that is a prime opportunity for us to flip that district. In Iowa, we have 2 congressional districts, Iowa 1st congressional district and Iowa's 3rd congressional district. In Iowa's 1st congressional district, Congresswoman Marinette Miller-Meeks won by only 799 votes. That is the closest race that any Republican member of Congress won, and she is deeply unpopular. Similarly, there's races in Michigan and Wisconsin that folks, in the Chicago area can volunteer in and channel their time and energy to. But the main point that I want to make sure that your folks and listeners know is that winning back the House is achievable. And in this moment, you mentioned there's a lot of confusion, there's so much going on. It is important to remind your listeners that folks have power and agency to help put a stop on Donald Trump. Just to paint a picture, in 2018, the last time there was a midterm election when Donald Trump was president and Democrats were in the majority, Democrats needed to flip 24 seats. In 2026, we only need to flip 3. And in 2024, Democrats lost the House by just 7,309 votes. That means that with 7,309 more votes for Democrats, we would have won the House and had a lever of governing power to put a check on Donald Trump. And so, I encourage listeners to go to swingleft.org/house, where they will find more information about our targets, the candidates, and more importantly, ways they can immediately get involved in order to start organizing their families, friends, and neighbors to defeat these Republicans.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Swing Left, and before we're done, we'll tell everybody again how to go there. It's important that people do. I think they have in the past. And you guys help people use their time, their energy, and their money, because you also talk about how to donate to which races could benefit. It's helpful for people, really. So let's talk about some of the races. Iowa's interesting because in the last really few years, the Democratic registration numbers have gone down as compared to the Republican numbers. There's a big independent group there, but Iowa's been very tough for Democrats in the last few cycles. It would be great to bring it back. And I think the Trump administration's policies are so terrible for rural America that we might have a chance in Iowa.
Yeah, I think Iowa has been a place of heartbreak, but recently this year, it's been a place of a lot of hope. Earlier this year, Democrats flipped a state Senate District 35, that is nested within the Iowa's 1st congressional district.
Yep.
And so that means, and that shows that there's momentum and that folks are deeply unpopular on the ground. And I will also say Congresswoman Marinette Miller-Meeks has given Democrats and independents a lot to be angry about. Congresswoman Miller-Meeks attacked public education. She is somebody who voted against funding Head Start twice. She is somebody who has blamed the rising cost of health care on Medicare, but opposed allowing Medicare to negotiate lowering drug prices. And she is somebody who is deeply unpopular and has actually decreased her vote margin since being elected. And she faces a challenger from the right. And so she not only needs to be even more extreme to make sure she can win the primary, but also she needs to answer for all of these horrible votes that she has taken. And so for us, that is a prime opportunity to flip that district and really make inroads on just one of the 3 districts we need to gain to flip the House majority.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it'd be great. Absolutely great.
And if I can, Edwin, I also quickly talk about Iowa's 3rd congressional district and Congressman Zach Nunn, because he voted to slash the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, that 31,000 households in his district rely on. This program gives children and folks that need a little support access to healthy food. Okay, and the reason he's supporting that is to give the ultra wealthy and billionaires a tax break. And so his district is it is also extremely competitive. And in 2022, last time there was a statewide governor's race, several Democrats that were on the ballot actually won that district. And so that shows us that this district is in play and is one that is prime for flipping as well.
Yeah, and look, SNAP is food for Americans who need it. I mean, oh my God, voting for that should be easy. But it's also, because it's food, it's a backhanded subsidy to American farmers, which also matters for Iowa. So it's a double whammy voting against it in that state.
Yeah. And there's also, the political environment. Not only are Republicans and Donald Trump doing things that are really hurting people on the ground, but also it's important to note that there are really good Democrats running. For example, there's going to be a governor's race. And Rob Sanders was extremely popular. And so there is also momentum on our side, which, again, to your listeners, underscores that their time and energy and money is going to go to races that can really, really make a difference.
Well, Tomas, I'm really glad you're talking about Iowa. For 3 years on this show, I have regularly featured folks from Iowa because it is a state that sort of, in many ways, has an exemplar of lots that's right with America and lots that's wrong with America, all in one little place. So, you get a really good chance to see how the country moves by looking at Iowa. And if it's moving back towards something sensible, that's just a very good sign.
Yes, it's a very good sign, and that's why we feel very bullish on Iowa. That's why we are building our organizing infrastructure. For anyone of your listeners who is either in Iowa or has family or friends in Iowa, we encourage them to go to swingleft.org/groups and find the nearest group in Iowa and begin to organize with their family and neighbors and friends, because there's a lot we can do, and it's going to make a difference.
Let's talk about, let's go to Wisconsin. Talk about Derek Van Orden. I mean, honestly, this is Wisconsin 3.
Yes. So Derek Van Orden is somebody who notably attended the January 6th Stop the Steal rally, but also he voted again to slash funding for the SNAP program we were just talking about. 34,000 people in his district rely on. He also, it's important, I want your listeners to know that district is also one that can flip. We saw after the April election of Crawford, the judge, that is a district that she won by 7.5 points per data crunched by a leading election analyst, and that shows that there's a 15-point swing from last year to this year. Notably, the Cook Political Report, which is a gold standard race rater, moved this district from lean Republican to toss-up. And so, that shows that this district is ripe for flipping. And frankly, the people of Wisconsin's 3rd district deserve better than somebody who is an election denier, Republican, wanting to gut Social Security and Medicaid and SNAP, and who also is nationally known for his angry outbursts, who has routinely yelled at children and his constituents in public ways, and that's unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I heard him, rant about abortion, saying that women don't, they need to have the strength of character to give birth under any circumstance. I mean, just horrid stuff.
Horrible stuff, and underscores why we need to defeat him. But also underscores that this district is ripe for flipping.
Yeah. All right. So I know you're laser focused on 3 to win and taking back Congress, and I applaud that. We absolutely must restore some checks and balances in our government. We have none now, none, and that means we are. I mean, you don't have to say it, but it's a tyranny from the president who has unchecked power, and that should not be the case in our country. So we need to win this back. But you've also focused on governor's races, and we have two. We have Virginia and I think New Jersey coming up. Is that right? And that's traditionally been an area where you've paid attention.
Yes. So in November there was going to be governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia. Notably, there are also Supreme Court races in Pennsylvania. And so we look forward to, in the coming weeks, releasing more information about our involvement in those races. What is important for your listeners, especially those in the Chicago area and in the Midwest, is that there is also going to be significant governor's races in Wisconsin and Michigan. And we are really encouraging folks to focus on winning back the House primarily and focusing on in districts in states like Wisconsin and Michigan that are also going to help the top of the ticket. To be clear, we will be mobilizing our groups in Virginia to do work in Virginia and our groups in New Jersey to do work in New Jersey. But for the vast majority of the country, we are really encouraging folks to channel their energy into races that are going to help flip the House next year, because that work needs to start now.
Yeah, it sure does. All right, so you have started. What are you hearing from people when you do voter contact? What are the things that are on their mind? What are they concerned about? I mean, we hear, they actually are concerned about cost of living. They're concerned about housing. They're afraid about health care. There's sort of economic anxieties, but they also are beginning to think maybe we should worry about the democracy. They certainly still care about abortion. What are you hearing?
Yeah, we're hearing all of those issues of concern for folks. But we're also hearing from our volunteers and our membership that, and I'll get to answer your question, but I think it's a really important point that our members and volunteers are extremely motivated and energized to knock doors, to organize starting now. And that is not a narrative that gets nearly enough coverage, because the work of democracy and organizing is, sometimes not the most appealing for headline news, but is the most impactful. And so I think for us, it's really important to note that we have the ability to understand voter sentiment because we have members and volunteers who are committed, dedicated, and fired up to really do the work of organizing. And I think a lot of what we're hearing recently across the country is a lot of concern about this so-called big, beautiful bill that is, coming up in the Senate and the House.
Right now, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. Yeah.
It is a disaster. And to be clear, for those who may not, fully be aware of what this bill is, this is Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress are working to cut essential programs like Medicaid and SNAP, programs that millions of people rely on to be able to lead healthy lives and simply be able to make ends meet. And the reason they're cutting these essential programs is to pay for tax breaks for the ultra wealthy and big corporations. And that is extremely concerning because that is going to directly impact people's lives.
It totally. They're going to take money from. They're going to take food out of people's mouths. They're going to take health care from millions of Americans. All of health care is going to be harder to get and going to be more stressed. So everybody's going to be impacted. They're going to increase costs for everybody through tariffs and everything else. In order to let's put it this way: Jeff Bezos's big, beautiful wedding in Venice that probably cost $65 million, and there are 90 private jets there right now for his big wedding. That's going to be paid for by American taxpayers giving him a break. Won't cost him a dime, but we're going to all pay more for that. And I don't know why that doesn't make people so furious they want to burn the whole place down, but, does me, man.
I will say, I do think it fires up a lot of people. And I will also say that, we've seen reporting this week that shows that Republicans know that their plan is extreme liability. They are trying to push it through and kind of sneak it under the radar because they are scared of how fired up folks are going to be heading into next year because they are already seeing it.
Yeah, Tomas, but they can't. All they can do is lie and say the bill didn't do what it does. Oh, we're not taking anybody's health care. Yes, you are. We're not taking food out of anybody's mouth, they say. Yes, you are. They're just lying. And they can't.
And I'm glad you brought up that point because, Mitch McConnell, who was asked this week actually about, what his message to constituents who are worried about their health care disappearing. His message to those constituency was to, and I quote, get over it. I want to say it again. Mitch McConnell said explicitly when asked what he would tell a mother who's worried about not being able to access basic health care, get over it.
Yeah.
And that shows you, and that underscores the disdain and really the cruelty in this plan and why Republicans are so scared to run on this plan and are trying to not bring attention to it. But guess what? Our organizers on the ground and our volunteers in districts across the country are already knocking doors, organizing their communities so that their friends and neighbors know about what's in this bill and, more importantly, are able to take action now to flip the districts needed in order to put an end to this next year.
Yeah, they ran away from this last cycle, pretending they didn't know what Project 2025 was. This bill turns Project 2025 into the law of the land, and they're lying about it again. But they're going to pass a bunch of it, I fear, and then we're going to live with it, and people are going to know. So I think they will be furious. The No Kings rally a week ago and the ones before, people are eager, as you say, to do something. And the rallies are important, and I think they do matter. But being organized and going door to door makes people feel great. It's a huge. I've never seen people get on a bus, join their neighbors, go out on a campaign, and not afterwards feel like, oh my God, I did something important. I did something to help. I'm sure you see that in your volunteers. It feels good to do this work.
Yes, we see it with our volunteers. And, I think another important narrative is, in this country, there is a loneliness epidemic. People are yearning for community. They're, yearning to get offline and do more in person. And for us, we see organizing both in door-to-door canvassing, but in joining groups as a vehicle for gathering in community and meeting neighbors and friends. And it doesn't mean that folks are just going to sit there and be political experts, right? Folks can gather and talk about current events, talk about what's going on in their communities, talk about what's going on in pop culture, and also talk about what's going on in our country and our democracy and make a plan for what they can do. And so, again, I said it earlier, but I really want to underscore this point that Republicans are trying to make us feel powerless. They're trying to make people feel like they don't have power, like they don't have agency, and that there's nothing they can do, and that's just not true. Yeah. Everyone has a role to play, and there's a way that folks can plug in and do their part. And for us at Swing Left, we also really understand that not all volunteers are made the same, right? Not everyone has the same amount of time, has the same amount of interest, has the same amount of a myriad of different factors. And we really provide an on-ramp and custom way for folks to get involved. And so I'll say it again, swingleft.org/groups. You can find more information there to sign up to your nearest Swing Left group. Or you can start one if there isn't one, near you. If if some of your listeners, are still not sure, they can drop us a line or send us an email to team@swingleft.org. Someone from our team will be in touch and be able to schedule a one-on-one consultation to learn more about what their interests are, what sort of bandwidth they have, and what makes the most sense for them in this moment, and how they can make the biggest difference.
Yeah. All right. So, Tomas, we got about 10 minutes left, and I want to just again talk or expand on this idea that you put out there about how organizing, how getting involved builds a sense of community. It addresses this sense of isolation that people feel, but it does so in a very positive and affirming way. And now I'm thinking about the role of organizing in the mayoral primary we just saw in New York. On one side, you had old school power, traditional Democratic powers and lots of money. And on the other, you had a lot of vibrant organizing. And as I watched that campaign, the more the organizing went on, the happier the organizers were. And, and that contributed to a sense of winning and maybe to the ultimate victory. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on the way the New York race went and its implications for campaigning.
I'm really glad you asked that question. And I will caveat and preface everything I say by saying Swing Left does not get involved in local elections. Swing Left is not an issue advocacy organization, so we do not take stances on policy. But, you did make a great point that what we saw was a really fresh campaign. And so no matter how you feel about Assemblyman Mamdani's politics and his policy stances, and to be clear, our membership has a very wide spectrum of opinions here. Assemblyman Mamdani's big win this week was a reminder that old school organizing combined with fresh and modern digital communications is how we win, even when folks are stacked against the odds. Just a few weeks ago, Assemblyman Mamdani was polling at 1%. However, his campaign mobilized over 50,000 grassroots volunteers who knocked on 1% doors, and importantly, really focused on listening to voters and building trust, which helped bridge the gap between mobilization and persuasion work in ways we haven't seen enough of nationally. And so I think for us at Swing Left,
I thought so too. Go ahead.
The big lesson that we're taking away is organizing, and we actually affirmed, and we believe that those results affirm that organizing works, organizing matters, and it needs to be part of a broader strategy that includes fresh communications strategies, reaching voters in new ways. But really what undergirds those communications to voters is the organizing and the listening, the two-way conversations that are so critical that inform some of the policy positions that candidates are taking.
Yep.
And it's important to know it's not just what folks may perceive to be more progressive policy stances, but it could also inform more moderate or centrist policy.
Yeah,
right?
I'm going right there. Listen, when you organize at scale, you organize people who have different views. That's what coalition building is, organizing at scale, because we are a diverse and different kind of country. But that means that each of us has to be proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with people we don't agree with about a number of things, but whom we do agree with about some very big things. And then we work out our differences, and you win some today and I win some tomorrow, and we move forward that way.
We completely agree, and we also, it's important to underscore that, for a lot of in all of these races, elections are oftentimes binary. You can either work and vote for a Democrat who you agree with on probably 9 out of 12 issues, or you are going to help elect a Republican in which you agree with on no issues.
Yeah.
And so, we have some left to really believe politics is an additive endeavor where we need to be expanding a coalition. We need to be working to listen to voters, listen to people, engage in a real and robust way. But to your point, Edwin, in an additive way where we are, standing shoulder to shoulder, even if we don't necessarily agree on every single thing.
I think it was Ed Koch. He said, look, if you agree with me 80% of the time, vote for me. If you agree with me 100% of the time, go see a psychiatrist.
Yes.
Right? I mean, we all have different views about the world. I mean, have dinner with your family and talk about politics. You're going to find that not everybody agrees about everything, and you still love them.
Right, and it's also important to note that folks in different parts of the country have different views, and that's okay, because that's what makes our country beautiful and diverse. But what is most important is that, the biggest lesson that we are encouraging folks to take away from, the New York City mayoral primary is that sustained two-way conversation with voters is critically important and must be central to all campaigns moving forward. It cannot be, last minute sort of trying to get out the vote 2 or 3 weeks before the election without building real trust and authentic channels of communication with voters. And that's why we at Spring Left believe in organizing early, robustly, authentically. And frankly, that's why we've already started organizing.
Yep.
And we are looking to expand our pool of volunteers and supporters. And so, I think for us, it really resonates what you say about standing in solidarity with folks who you may not agree with on everything, but that you need to have the ability and the channel to have conversations with them.
Right. Trust your neighbors and work with them, and you'll build a better world. If you do that, you'll work out the differences. I mean, and we do. It's not just differences in ideas. In a big country like this, there are differences in interests, too, and they have to be managed. But that's what you do in a democracy. And that is what this monster in the White House would take away from all of us and dictate to us how it goes. Right? Hit you over the head, put your college out of business, and make a deal. Okay, I have a knife to your throat. Let's make a deal. That's not who we want to be. And I bet you're hearing a lot of people in America go, wait a minute, we can't have this. So if you don't want it, let's go to work and flip 3 seats. All right. Now that we have a minute left, tell us one more time where we can go to sign up.
You can go to swingleft.org/gather. Again, that is swingleft.org/gather. Or if your listeners want to send an email, they can send our team a note at team@swingleft.org. That is team@swingleft.org.
All right. Tomas, thank you very much for your time today and for the work that you and everyone at Swing Left does. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Edwin. And again, to your listeners, remember, you are not powerless. You have agency, and there's a role for you in our democracy. And we at Swing Left are the front door for you to come in and take action.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a break for the news, and my friend David Pepper joins us when we come back.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, as promised, David Pepper is back. He is the former chair of the Ohio Democrats, author of Laboratories of Autocracy, which taught the country about the anti-democratic movement that captured state houses before it went national, writer of fiction, painter of landscapes, and indefatigable fighter for the kind of good government we deserve, but mostly don't get. David, welcome back.
Thanks so much. Good to be with you.
Hey, you and I have we've been at this conversation, I don't know, for a few years, and we've talked about right-wing, state houses, how they're the sword, and the Supreme Court's been the shield to protect them for so long. But the Supreme Court has now pulled out its own sword and has started to undermine democracy or the rule of law in its own way. So before we talk about, what's going on in the states, do you want to talk about any of the decisions that came out of this horrible Supreme Court term?
Yeah, I tried to write about this morning. Are you getting feedback, by the way?
Oh, a little. It sounds a little grainy.
I'm getting a ton. Can you call me back quick to try to fix that?
Paul, will you call him back?
Yeah, sorry. It's bad.
All right, great. All right, everybody. So while we call him back, David did write about this morning. And, Pepper Perspectives on Substack is a pretty remarkable place right now. So you can read David's stuff there. And he talked about this court in the context of Project 2025 as the project's author's dream come true. And it's a good read. All right. What a court, though. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of asking David about this, but, the decisions have been one appalling, one after the other. Oh, sounds like you're back. How does it sound, David?
Let's see. So bad.
I don't know what's going on. Hey, are you anywhere near a laptop? We can do it that way.
No, actually, it's gone now. It's fine now.
All right. Wow.
It's good now. We can go.
All right. Well,
so you asked about the court. So what I wrote this morning on my Substack was, if you were literally going to write a chapter of Project 2025 on what the federal courts could do to assist an authoritarian push and to assist making all the things in Project 2025 happen, it would look just like what this current Supreme Court is doing. And you would give immunity for federal officials when they break the law. You would make it harder for courts to stop lawless actions. You would interpret, the text to support the field theory, and you would interpret the text or ignore the text whenever it seems to get in the way of, lawlessness. And that's what the court's doing. On Monday, they took an immigration case where Trump in the administration had literally violated court orders twice, and the Supreme Court literally didn't care that he had clearly violated court orders twice, and they gave him what he asked for. And obviously yesterday, in the birthright citizenship case, they basically said that courts who have used national injunctions for years to stop lawless, unconstitutional activity essentially can't do that anymore. So they're basically playing a role of assisting Trump and all that he's doing. And, he knows it. He celebrated it yesterday. He praised the decision right away. Of course, he mischaracterized it as well. But it's just the same theme from immunity to disqualification to now the orders this week. It's just been an absolute sort of if Trump is Batman, this is Robin Hood. The court is Robin. This is a court that is in a time where the executive is way overreaching. They are allowing it to happen almost with every decision.
I think their vision, John Roberts and gang, their vision for the way America is supposed to work is that every 4 years, without really protecting voting rights, we have some kind of vote, and we pick a dictator for 4 years, because they've undermined Congress's ability to manage elections when they undid McCain-Feingold and gave us Citizens United. They undermine their ability to regulate, and then they undermine, as you know more than anybody, they undermine our ability to have our votes matter with their gerrymandering rulings. And now they say a president should have as much power as he can have for those 4 years. It's not, there's no precedent for this. It's not what the Constitution says. It's not what our history's about. I don't really know where they're coming from, but as you say, it's just terribly dangerous.
I mean, I hate to say it, there is a precedent. It's what the Supreme Court did to get us Jim Crow. The Supreme Court in the late 1800s did the exact same thing. There was a sort of nonstop fierce attack on the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments through all the southern states. It clearly violated both the intent and the language of the 14th, 15th Amendment as the people who wrote those amendments had expressed them. And the Supreme Court in the late 1800s gutted all of it. And the best precedent for what the court is doing now, it's the same thing. I mean, we are stuck with a court that is basically, supporting and protecting all sorts of moves that only a decade ago, before these decisions, would have clearly been in violation of multiple decisions and multiple interpretations of the Constitution, and they've just upended all of it. So the sad part is, in one way, I'm not to get too negative here, but in one way we almost took for granted, because of the Warren Court, that the court is supposed to play this positive serving justice role in our country. But the sad truth is, at many points in our country's history, the court has done the opposite. And that's what we're living through right now. Yeah. The court is playing a sort of anti-democracy, conservative role, and supporting, the kind of movements we're seeing right now. And it's exactly what led to Jim Crow and what locked out so many Americans from their democracy for, 70 years.
I think I accept that. I think that's absolutely right. And the reliance on, the Warren Court gave us a lot of good things, but it also it made that people on the left lose the muscle for the memory muscle for organizing and let us rely too much on lawyers. So we thought lawyers and lawsuits would do the job for us, as opposed to what actually created all these freedoms in the first place, which was massive organizing. They actually gave us these rights. And we're learning that again and starting to do it again.
Yeah, and I say this as a lawyer. I think that, and it's painful to say it, but I think thinking the courts are going to save us is just now clearly not the case. I think state Supreme Courts could offer some hope in some cases. We had a big decision, for example, earlier this week on vouchers in Ohio, which was similar to what the Kentucky Supreme Court and the South Carolina Supreme Court, red state courts did, striking down vouchers unconstitutional. So maybe there's some hope in some state Supreme Courts that can't be overruled by the U.S. Supreme Court. Right now, I think the idea that one of the problems is this is where so much of the media attention goes to the court as if it can save us. People apparently like to watch court hearings and big cases, but the No Kings rally and what comes out of it and the organizing that comes out of that type of people-driven movement is by far our best hope to turn things around. We have to keep doing it. We have to then channel it into not just go rally and then go home, but voter turnout and candidates running and ballot initiatives that are decisively won, because courts aren't going to save us. And my worry is, if you're watching all the Republicans line up today, as bad as this budget bill is, my guess is they're going to, by one vote or so, get that done too. So we're just going to have to take the frustration and the anger and the fear and channel into massive people-driven movements, or it's just going to keep happening.
Yeah, I am seeing, even in Illinois, which is not, in peril of supporting a lot of Republicans these days, a stealing of people for the STEL, stealing for the fight.
Right.
I talked to somebody yesterday, a state legislator who was thinking about a constitutional amendment in Illinois, and it's harder to do in Illinois than in Ohio. We don't have a direct initiative; it's got to go through the legislature first. But that would put on the ballot in the because constitutional amendments have to be voted on then by the public. Protections for masked ICE agents who come masked and with no ID and kidnap people. And, that kind of thing on a ballot would drive a lot of turnout.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And some states do have more opportunity than others to do this. We just tried to do it and unfortunately fell a little bit short, although I really admire the effort to get signatures to repeal an attack on universities. In only a few weeks, a total grassroots effort collected 200,000 signatures. They needed more, and they started late, and they had almost no institutional support. But I was out collecting signatures for them. It was amazing just how much that effort created attention, created infrastructure and energy. And any time, I think, and I went to a conference where this was said, so I don't want to act like I'm the one who made up the phrase, but we have to create friction whenever we can. I mean, think about it one way. I think we have basically a year and a half where they control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and clearly the court. We have November 26th has to be when we start grabbing those institutions back. So everything we can do between now and then to delay things, to create bottlenecks and obstacles for what they want to do, every month of delay is a win. And we just have to see it that way. So any friction that we can create versus silence versus sort of just letting it go is a win if it delays things, makes it more complicated, et cetera. And I think that's how – and so whether it's initiatives, whether it's, midterm, whether it's special elections, whether it's bottling up things like Cory Booker did, but a lot more than that, all of that is something that we have to do, because otherwise they just will move very quickly before we have a chance to reassert power in 2026.
I agree with you. And this week is anything that anybody who's listening can do to get on the phone, to harangue a legislator, to get them to balk at this terrible bill in Congress. It's a good thing. I agree with you, David, when you said they're going to pass this by one or two votes. Of course, my ear heard by B-U-Y, one or two votes.
Right. Well, Hawley, I've just been watching this. By the way, you should know, if you hear back, I'm stuck in Atlanta because I'm flying home. I was supposed to be back in Ohio, and I'm in one of these travel hells where, there's no car rentals to drive back to Ohio. The next flight isn't for a couple of days. So I am keeping up just on social media because I'm stuck here. Hawley, about an hour ago, says he's for advancing things, even though he's been one of the loudest people against it because he said he didn't want to see Medicaid cut. Collins is already – so now there are a few still against it, but you watch these things, and they always seem to have the votes by one, and then they release a couple people. But you're seeing some of the people who spoke out the loudest. You're seeing some of the people who spoke out the loudest and looked like they were going to show some backbone, like Hawley, of course, caving.
Yeah, I mean, they put party over country for sure. And I think the latest Ron Wyden told us, I think this morning, that the nonpartisan budget office says the current iteration of the bill takes $1 trillion out of Medicaid. $1 trillion. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand it.
One of the senators, I can't remember which one, said he's waiting for the CBO score before he votes for it. I think this was, can't remember who it was. I'm like, great, let's wait for it because it's going to be terrible. Terrible. They've all talked about the deficit. They all have. I just tweeted out a few minutes ago. This is the story of your and my lifetimes. I think we're kind of around the same age. They never care about the deficit when they're in power. They explode it. This time, I think they're building the debt limit to $5 trillion. They're about to vote for that. And so, and the other thing that I think, and then of course, when we're in power, they act like they care about it. But the minute they get to power, they explode the deficit of debt, and that's about to happen. But I do think, in the end, I mean, we already saw it. For the first time in a long time, first quarter growth was down in GDP, a big reversal. And at some point, they can spin and claim they're not cutting things and claim it's good for the economy, but the facts on the ground will be the facts on the ground. And I think that at some point in the next year, they're not going to be able to lie their way out of the consequences of this thing. And that's when we better be running everywhere, having already done the work to recruit and run and get organized, so that when people see what they're doing and how it affects their lives, we're running aggressively all over and taking advantage of it politically. I wish the damage weren't being done, but it's going to be clear. We need to make it clear, and the best way to do that is that we're on offense all over the country.
I agree with you about that. Offense is very important because they will try and blame, I don't know, I don't even know, any Democrat they can find, John Kennedy, Barack Obama, whoever they can blame, they'll blame. Yeah. And it'll be their fault. And we have to be pointing that out regularly. Hey, I just want to talk to you about Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, yes, especially when we're not one of the killers when we're not running in places is that they get to blame us, and there's no one to make the counter argument. Yeah. Let's say in Ohio. They've controlled Ohio for every year except for 4 years in 40 years. And they still run now. Vivek, for example, running for governor, he's running as if Democrats have done anything. He's running saying, we have this problem. That, like, right, and you've been there the entire time. Your party has run the state for 40 years, and all the terrible outcomes are because of whether it's schools struggling or whether it's, poverty or the fact that people are on food stamps all over rural Ohio. It's because they've been in charge. Their trickle-down doesn't work, but you wouldn't know it because if we're not running in places, they get to say all that stuff, and there's no one there to counter it. So they'll get away with blaming.
And you get credit for that, David. I mean, you have been long a champion of running everywhere. And I think about North Carolina. I think about what you've done in Ohio. I think about Nebraska, places where we really have started to put candidates where and Iowa too, where we didn't do it before.
Yeah, it's true. Because think about it. If we aren't there, then they say to the local rural public school, and there's no other school to go to, the reason you're doing badly is because of the border or because of critical race theory being taught in some law school in Chicago or something. And if we're not there, we're not saying, actually, that's completely ridiculous. The reason this school is doing poorly is because you at the State House defunded it. Yep. And that's why it's so important. I agree, people. It was amazing that we had a candidate in every district in Florida last year. That was huge. In North Carolina, the fact that Anderson Clayton recruited in all but 2 districts is one reason Allison Riggs won her Supreme Court race, because there was someone running everywhere and lifted turnout. We have to keep doing that. But it also is about the message, because if we're not everywhere, they will figure out how to blame problems in Ohio on the new mayor of New York City or something.
Of course.
And we won't be there to say anything else. When most of the problems in states that are struggling, red areas in particular, are coming right out of the trickle-down economics that they're pushing through their state houses that they've gerrymandered. And we have to be everywhere in the country saying that.
Yeah. It's also, all of this stuff, as you pointed out, when you're not, when you don't, when it's gerrymandered and no one's running against you, you're not really accountable to voters, and so you don't care what the voters think, and that leads to such corruption. And you recently talked about a pension fund issue in your state, and I laughed out loud because earlier in my life, I ran against a corrupt governor in my own party. And one of the things that drove me to run against him was what he did to our pension funds. He got rid of very competent pension fund managers in order to pick his own, because after all that, there's a lot of money there. And you had a similar thing happen in Ohio.
Oh, my gosh. I actually think this has been a real eye-opener for me, what's happened. So this is the Teachers Pension Fund of Ohio, one of the biggest, $90 billion. Like, so much of the pay-to-play and graft and politics is peanuts compared to the money in these pensions.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about everyone on Wall Street wants a piece of the Ohio Teachers Pension Fund, let alone Illinois and California. And what we've seen in Ohio is teachers figuring out that at least, I try not get into, this is for the teachers to decide, not me or any of their politicians. But for the last 3 years, the teachers who were denied their cost of living adjustment, even when the economy is strong, started voting for what were called reform members of the pension fund board. And these teachers were saying, we want more transparency as to why we're not getting our cost of living adjustment. We want the cost of living adjustment, and we don't understand why all these Wall Street private equity firms are getting massive amounts of fees from our pension fund when we're not getting paid our COLA. So they started demanding better, and they won multiple elections in a row to change the board of this massive pension fund. Yeah. And ever since, I know this is a lot of background, but ever since the politicians in Columbus, which is the most corrupt state house in America. If you go to HBO and you'll see there's 2 documentaries right now on Ohio. They started literally undoing the outcomes of these elections. And because someone, I think, is in their ear saying, do not allow these teachers and retirees to change the way that we are investing $90 billion. And it got so bad that last week at 1:30 in the morning, the politicians of Columbus, I'm sure being told by some moneyed interests, do not let these teachers get their way, literally passed a bill completely upending the makeup of the pension fund so that now it's controlled not by the elections of retirees and teachers who built the fund and rely on it, but now 8 out of the 11 members will be appointees of the politicians. It's a coup, and it undoes 3 years of elections where everyday teachers, 500,000 members, have been voting to they finally achieved it. It was sort of a good democracy story. They finally achieved a majority that was saying we're going to bring more transparency to how $90 billion is invested, and we're going to maybe look at indexes as opposed to private equity because the returns are better and the fees are smaller, and you get more money. And somewhere, I think this was such a threat to money interests that they said to these Columbus politicians, you must stop the teachers from demanding better. And it's what happened. Horrible, just a horrible case study of what these gerrymandered state houses do.
Similar here when we had a corrupt governor. He decided he would sell off the management of the pension fund to the highest bidder, and it got worse outcomes than average around the country. It's one of the reasons Illinois has a huge pension problem, but the poor returns that his leadership gave to that fund partly contributed to it. It's terrible. You
absolutely.
just got to do the job.
And I have watched closely the shabby. And by the way, just so everyone knows, these retired teachers, my guess is around the state, a majority are probably Republican. So I think that we're talking about rural teachers and retirees in their 80s and 70s, all across Ohio. This is not I think some Republicans like to think that teachers are just Democrats, and maybe current active teachers in certain districts are. But when I'm on the Facebook page, and I often post on the Facebook page, sometimes my Facebook messages are removed because they're like, he's too partisan. Like, this is not a partisan issue for these folks. Many of these folks are literally supporters of Vivek Ramaswamy, but they are absolutely livid that their voice has just basically what happened is they were just disenfranchised. They had majority control of their pension fund, but when their votes were coming in a way that threatened certain moneyed interests, they have literally, it's sort of a Jim Crow tactic back when African Americans started to be able to vote more. They basically say, sorry, not only are we going to dilute your vote, you just basically, your votes now only count for 3 of the 11 members of the pension board, even though they used to count for 7 of them. Yeah. It really is. But to me, it's a real case study of what happens when you threaten real power and real money. They just go after it. In a gerrymandered state house, they did it in the middle of the night. They didn't do it through a separate bill as is required. They did it through a sneaky budget amendment. So this is how bad it is. This is a lot of detail, but we have a budget conciliation process in Ohio where there's a Senate budget and a House budget, and 6 people are supposed to reconcile the differences in the budgets that came out of the Senate and the House. This change didn't come up in either one of the 2 budgets of the Senate or the House. So there was really nothing to reconcile. It's not even a budget issue. This just appeared at 1:30 in the morning as part of a reconciliation process, never having been brought up before that. And then within 24 hours, it's done. So it never went through one hearing at the State House. Completely lawless.
Yeah. Well, it's being mirrored at the federal level as you and I speak with an absolutely horrid bill that contains stuff that will disenfranchise people and stuff that will make our country worse in every possible way. As usual, you and I have ground through our time pretty quickly. Hey, David, I hope not to say anything bad about Atlanta, but I hope you get out of there and get home. And that your travel purgatory ends safely and soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thanks for focusing on all this stuff. And just as you said, I know that was a lot of detail on how pension, but it's a case study of the way that high power interests are just running over democracy, including, in this case, hundreds of thousands of teachers and retirees and their interests.
Yep. I think it's a very good one. Thanks for sharing it.
Okay. Take care.
All right.
See you soon.
You too.
Okay, bye.
All right, everybody, we're going to take another break. And when we come back, the remarkable writer John Nichols is joining us.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody, we are very lucky that John Nichols hasn't gotten bored with us yet, and he's back. He is, of course, the editor-in-chief of Cap Times in Wisconsin and national affairs correspondent for The Nation. John, welcome.
Edwin, it's good to be with you, sir.
So I know you spent time in New York in the run-up to the mayoral election there, and I want to talk about that. But first, can I just get your wisdom on 3 little things? The Supreme Court session that just ended, the prospects for Trump's ugly reconciliation bill, and his foray into Iran.
All right. Well, let's take one at a time, and then you can remind me if I forget something. First and foremost, the Supreme Court session is the last week or so, the last 10 days, incredibly scary. Because what had developed since Trump became president was sort of a sub-argument that suggested that while things were bad, and certainly the courts were not, upending everything he was doing, there was reasonable evidence that the courts were pushing back. And so the theory was that on the craziest of things, the worst of things, it was likely that, things would turn out okay, right? The Supreme Court, or at least some of the courts, would push back, right? And that didn't happen. Didn't happen on birthright citizenship, although that's a complex one. It didn't happen on a number of these other issues that arose. And so I think what you take away from it, Edwin, is an indication that the court is worse than we thought, less likely to come to the rescue. And I know there's a lot of liberals and, predictable people who will say, oh, we all knew the court was terrible. No, you didn't, quite frankly. What you knew was you didn't like a lot of the people that got put on the court, and you presumed they were going to do some bad stuff. But you didn't know that they were going to be as bad as they have turned out to be. And that's a big deal, because what that means is the court is not coming to our rescue. And it also means that if Democrats take control of the House and the Senate in 2026, they got to stop approving judges. I mean, if Trump nominated somebody great, well, of course you approve that person, right? Or even a moderate, right? That's fine. But if Trump keeps nominating extremists, you can't say yes to that, right? That just doesn't function. And then if Democrats come to power in 2028, they have to have a plan to reform the courts, to expand the number of people on the Supreme Court, to address a lot of these other issues. That's a big deal. And so what's happened last week is no small matter. It changes a lot of our discussions, and I think, frankly, it invites us to get a lot more serious about the challenges we face, and especially what's going on with the court. That's a big deal.
So
your second question.
Right. Well, hang on. Let's stick with that one for 1 second.
Okay.
Friendly amendment. You said the court is not coming to our rescue. I think the court is actively harming us. I
give you that.
Yeah. And for too long on the left, people have outsourced our progress to lawyers, thinking the court was better than it is as an institution.
100%
and we have to relearn the muscle memory of organizing and mass movements.
Well, you're nailing it right there. And, Robert M. LaFollette, when he ran for president 100 years ago, in 1924, one of the biggest themes of his platform, good Wisconsin man, one of the biggest themes of his platform was you can't trust the courts. The courts are actively going to try, and in that case, what he was saying was undermine the working class, undermine unions, undermine, the fight against power. But it's broader now, and if we take that in, it doesn't mean we're fine. We still have a lot of problems, but we've got a stronger analysis. So what we've learned from the last 10 days or so is to have a much stronger analysis as regards to courts.
Yep. Okay. That's the court session.
Two other ones.
Well, we have this reconciliation bill that they're voting on, starting to vote on as you and I are speaking.
Today. Yeah. Look, it's a terrible bill, and it will get somewhat moderated by the Senate, and then it'll go back to the House. And so we've got a lot of fights ahead of us. The reality is that the Republicans have lost their fight on this. Doesn't mean they won't pass something. They could pass something really bad, but they won't pass what they passed in the House, and they probably won't even get to near where they wanted in the Senate. We've been able to beat them back on a lot of fronts. But we can't be satisfied with that. Anybody who says to you, oh, well, I guess we'll have to compromise with them. No, there's no compromise when they're coming for Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. And frankly, when all sorts of veterans programs and other things are threatened, the answer to this has to be no. We can't do this. Now, the lucky thing is that there are some right-wing Republicans who also object. They object because of their, strict fiscal conservatism. I may not agree with that, but, that's where they're at, and that's cool. The combination of a united Democratic front with a handful of right-wing Republicans means that we have a very good chance of stalling this thing, and the longer it's stalled, the better, frankly.
From your mouth to God's ears. I think they're going to buy the votes, and I don't think we're that lucky, but I hope you're right. Oh, my gosh.
No. I think, look at one of the things I agree with you. This is not easy. I'm telling you what we have to do, not what we will do, because the Democrats in Congress don't always do what they should. But they're talking about one interesting thing as an example. This is very good. They're talking about requiring the clerk of the Senate to read the entire bill, which you can do, right? That will delay for days. And this is the kinds of things that you do. Frankly, I hate to say that it's petty, but it's, at the end of the day, if you're talking about taking away people's Medicaid, right? Yep. So that's my perspective on it. And I think, frankly, this is something they wanted to do by Memorial Day. We're on the cusp of the 4th of July. If we keep fighting, who knows? Maybe we get to Labor Day or even later. To get beyond Labor Day, this becomes a big issue in the odd-year elections in the fall in Virginia, New Jersey, mayoral seats around the country, et cetera. Democrats keep fighting, fight hard.
I like hell.
And yeah. All right. Yep. And then you had a third one.
Iran, but I don't. That's up to you if you have any thoughts about that.
I think the Iran thing is a really it was deeply unsettling because the president did it without any congressional consultation. Yes. There was no oversight. We should always remember that when we let presidents get us into undeclared wars, things go badly. And so right off the bat, I'm glad that some people like Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey and some others pushed back. I think that was really important. I think it did have some influence on Trump. I think he's kind of dialed things back now a little bit. I think he realized this isn't a fight that he wants to be in the middle of. And so we may be headed in the right direction, but this is incredibly volatile stuff. And Trump does not listen to anybody at the State Department. He doesn't listen to people who offer sound advice. And so he put us in, as a country, and frankly as a world, in an incredibly dangerous place. Right? And it's a reminder. You don't have to look at the precise, granular details of what just happened, but look in the broader sense and recognize that within the last week or so, we were on the verge of potential nuclear war. And if you realize that, and you realize how casually Donald Trump approaches these things, you start to get a perspective that this is a very dangerous president. He's not just dangerous because of what he does when he wants to do something or when he believes in it or whatever. He's also dangerous because he does not know the basic facts of the regions in which he's meddling. And
he's not interested in learning.
Will tell you that's right. No. He will not listen to conservative Republicans who tell him what he should listen to or think about. And so as a result, we will be in this place again. It may not be as regards Iran, but it'll be someplace else. And we should be very conscious of that.
I mean, I was struck by this. On June 16th,
yep.
Bibi Netanyahu, who had gone to war with Iran, told the whole world that Israel's mission has been successful. We have set Iran's nuclear program back a very, very long time.
Yep.
6 days later, Donald Trump says, I'm going to bomb Fordo. But we know from Bibi that the mission had already been accomplished, that there wasn't, so you gotta wonder what was really on his mind here, because it wasn't that anybody was under threat from nuclear weapons in Iran anymore. So this is an interesting thing, because there is some suggestion that he was just watching everything that was going on and decided that, he wanted to be a part of it. And if it's as simple as that, that's a really scary reality. But very big abuse of power. Yeah.
Well, and also there's one deeper reality too. This lack of knowledge, this lack of focus. We don't even know what, if anything, was accomplished in Iran. But smart analysts, people like Trita Parsi and others, will tell you there's a very good chance that the Iranians had all of their uranium, or the Iranians had all their uranium and all their other essential tools mobilized. And so as a result, they could move them out at a moment's notice. And so we don't have any assurance, really, that there was success in that mission. Now, Trump doesn't like it when we say that. He's threatening to sue, I think, various publications and broadcast outlets. Yeah. But I'm not trying to be mean to Donald Trump. I'm just saying, if we listen to the experts, I'm just saying if you listen to the experts will tell you they do not know whether we achieved what he said we did. Yeah. That's a mess. Yeah.
Mess. All right, let's turn to New York, because you were there for a while, and I think it's fascinating because it's New York, but also it's a generational shift in our politics, and it is a lovely example about how money doesn't always win.
That's right. And it was a lot of money. I mean, understand this. Yeah. Zoran is he had a lot of money, enough money to run a really good campaign, about $8 million. But the other guys had their own $8 million And then they had tens of millions more coming in for their super PACs. And I was in New York in the run-up to the election. If you turned the television on, all you saw was negative ads on Zoran Mamdani. They were all attacking at every turn, and they were brutal, and they accused him of everything you can imagine. What's incredible about it is that as they attacked him, his numbers went up. And why is that? My thinking is that one of the lessons from New York, maybe not the only lesson, but an important one, is that people really are getting beyond this. You know what I mean? They're increasingly not watching as much television, using social media more. But also, I think people are developing a greater skepticism, or at least a thicker skin, when it comes to political lies of this kind. And so the fact that he came through this primary with a big win, despite all the attacks on him, that's a very encouraging thing. And then you say, well, how did he do it? What was the trick of it? Strong stands on the issues, a clear focus on practical realities in people's lives, and a grassroots army, if you will, of around 50,000 people, just a huge mobilization at the grassroots. Those are the things that insulated him from all the attacks. And I think for the Democratic Party, the lessons are very, very simple. What you want is an edgier politics that speaks much more boldly, much more effectively, doesn't apologize for being radical on some stuff, but your boldness and your radicalism has to be on the issues that people care about, right? And that's kind of the heart of the matter. I'll give you a very good example. In one of the debates, they asked, where would you take your first trip as mayor, right? And because Zoran Mamdani has been very critical of Israel, and his opponents tried to make that a part of the campaign. Several of them, many of them said, oh, my first trip would be to Israel, right? Okay, that's practical. That's fine. It's part of politics. Zoran Mamdani's answer was, like, this first trip would be the 5 boroughs in New York. I'm running to be mayor in New York. I want to go talk to the people. You know what I mean? It was by far it's just a brilliant answer, right? You know, and you can debate the guy. You can disagree with him on particular issues, but you got to recognize this is somebody who listens to the questions that he gets asked and actually tries to give a good answer, which he did.
I think people are tired of a certain kind of politics. Is it true? I heard this, and I wasn't there, so I don't know this. Did Andrew Cuomo run a Willie Horton ad? Did he run an ad that darkened Mamdani's beard and made it longer?
One of his PACs is accused of that. Not Cuomo himself, not his own campaign, but I think a PAC associated with him. I think it was one funded by Michael Bloomberg. But the accusation is rooted in something that was highlighted by Mamdani. And, you know, there were pictures of him, yes, with a darker, longer beard.
I think people, particularly Democrats, are sick of that. Sick of it.
Yeah. I think people in general, I think they don't like that. Yeah, I agree with you. But then the other thing is, even when stuff like this happened, the one thing to understand about Mamdani is he kept it fun. He kept it light. He did not let them bring him down to a point where he was ranting and raving or, you know, like overly upset. He didn't play a victim ever. No, he was moral and practical, and he gave a great speech on anti-Semitism in which he talked about what it meant to him to be accused of it. That's a pretty rough accusation, right? It's something nobody wants to have said about him. And he instead of running away from it or denying or doing whatever, he gave a thoughtful speech in which he talked about what he believes, why he believes the things he believes, but also saying, I think in a very sincere way, that if I'm the mayor, I'm going to protect everyone in this city, and that includes our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Muslim brothers and sisters. You know, he spoke about it in that way, and I think, you know, not everybody would be satisfied with that answer, right? But I think for a lot of people, it was a very, it was a healing answer, and it told you a lot about how he'll operate if he becomes mayor.
So I reminded me, you know, way back when Barack Obama was running for president the first time, and he was attacked because his minister gave a sermon that included a sentence about America that wasn't particularly complimentary. Barack ended up giving, you know, his barbershop speech where he talked about I get this charge about being angry and black, but let's talk for a minute about what's going on. And it was a similar kind of thing. It was not a bunch of sound bites. It was an honest, thoughtful, conversation on a topic that's normally too hard for politics.
Yeah. And look, this is the thing about Mamdani, I think, in general. He was, I guess the way to say it, Edwin, and this is one of the more interesting, to me at least, one of the more interesting ways to discuss a campaign. Campaigns are very intense. They demand a lot from you. You're supposed to get up early, stay up late, work really hard, blah, blah, blah. Most politicians don't. Most politicians spend all their time in an air-conditioned room calling down a list of names asking for money. Mamdani didn't do that. Mamdani actually was turning money back after a certain point because he had reached the fundraising limits. And so he was out actually campaigning. He often started before 6 in the morning and went some nights till 2 or 3 in the morning. And oddly enough, when you do that, you have a lot of time. And this is the interesting thing. Mamdani, in the course of this campaign, took a lot of time to talk about issues, to talk with people, to listen to people, to go to their neighborhoods. If there was a neighborhood where he wanted to up his profile, he didn't just, make one stop in front of a bodega. He would walk the streets, sometimes for a day, with local elected officials. The end result was it seemed as if he had all the time in the world. And you know what? If you're looking for a mayor, you want somebody that's got the time for you. Right? You want somebody who seems like, I can handle this. You want me to come be out there at 9 o'clock? I can get out there at 9 o'clock. He even on the last day of the campaign, or last Friday of the campaign, amazing thing. He went on at 5 o'clock. He goes on social media. And he says, I'm up at Inwood in the very top of Manhattan, the very tip of Manhattan. I'm going to start right now. I'm going to walk down all the way to the bottom of Manhattan, the other end. That's miles and miles. The whole island of Manhattan. I'm going to walk the whole thing tonight. If you want to join me, come along. And he walked through the city, through, Riverside neighborhood, Harlem, Upper West Side, down into around Carnegie Hall and places like that, down into, Times Square, into Chelsea, the West Village, the East Village, down all the way to the very bottom of Manhattan. And it was just a beautiful thing. You know what I mean? Beautiful. And every place he went, people jumped up from tables. The kids got their band instruments, their school band instruments, and came out and walked with them and played music while he was going.
That is. Yeah.
And then he finishes up down at 2 a.m. At 2 a.m., he finishes up down at the tip of Manhattan, the southern tip. And he said, and as I got there weren't a lot of people out partying. There weren't a lot of people out at bars, not down all the way down there. But I saw the guys who work on the Staten Island ferry coming up out of the subways, getting onto those ferries, because there's somebody working 24/7 to making New York City function. And I had the honor of seeing the Staten Island ferrymen and women coming to work at 2 in the morning.
Scott's like a great campaigner. Wow.
How do you not like that?
I love that. So what does it mean for Democrats? And maybe it doesn't mean anything, but maybe it does. That Andrew Cuomo, after a lifetime of being a Democrat, is saying, that doesn't matter so much. I'm thinking of leaving the party and running as an independent to run this race all over again.
Well, it tells you exactly what you want to know. There are some people who aren't really Democrats. What they are is, they're themselves, right? They're self-interested, and they're going to do what they want to do. And frankly, if they've got a loyalty, it's usually to corporations and billionaires who write big checks, right? That's a reality. And there's a lot of Democrats who would, meet that standard, if you will. And so I think it's very telling. But I think the other telling thing is this. And I want to emphasize this very strongly. I watched that campaign closely. There's a good chance Andrew Cuomo could have won the primary. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, no, he's a bad guy, and all sorts of negatives on him. And then, boy, does he have the negatives. I mean, I'm not denying that. But if he had run a more upbeat campaign, if he had talked about things he had accomplished and wanted to accomplish, if he had offered people something positive, and hopeful. I think he would have done much better. I don't know if he would have actually won. I think Mamdani had something amazing going on. But Cuomo could have done much better. He chose to run a brutally negative, crude, disengaged campaign that made you feel lousy just watching it, right? It was all negatives. It was all fear. He didn't talk about, the fact that he actually had a hand in, fixing up train stations and airports and bridges and, you know what I mean? That he was a guy who actually did take a strong stand for gay rights at a critical moment, gay marriage. And so at the end of the day, Cuomo ran a lousy campaign and he got beat. Now he's suggesting apparently that he wants to run another lousy campaign, right? A fear-based campaign. Oh, don't elect this young man because even though you liked him in the primary, as you learn more about him, you'll like him less. Well, it's just I don't think it's going to happen, frankly.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm just so sorry. I mean, I worked with Andrew at HUD years ago. We were colleagues.
There you go.
And I'm sorry that this is what it's come to. I remember, again, go back to Chicago when Harold Washington won the Democratic primary. It was before we had a nonpartisan election for mayor. So there was the Republicans, they had a campaign called Epton Before It's Too Late. And the before it's too late meant, oh, my God, Chicago might elect a black mayor. And we did, and it was terrific.
Well, but you see, that's kind of what Cuomo's playing with now. And, at the end of the day, that just isn't going to it doesn't inspire. It doesn't speak to the moment. And what I'm seeing, and this is a big deal, what I'm seeing as we move toward this election is a lot of Democrats who I hadn't fully expected stepping up and doing the right thing, right? Endorsing Mamdani, not playing around, not fooling around. The unions are, jumping on board his campaign. The Building Services and Janitors Union, which is a very, very big one in New York, the hotel workers, others are endorsing Mamdani. Now, they had backed Cuomo, many of these people in the primary, but they are coming to Mamdani. The reason they're doing that is because they realize he's speaking to their members.
I bet their members are saying, come on now.
Yeah. And there will be some Democrats who don't endorse. There's some who will maybe even go with Cuomo if he runs. I don't know that he will for sure, but if he does. But they are the past. They're the people who can't get their head wrapped around, the fact that we have a new politics today. And this new politics is a politics that demands much more authenticity, much more of an engagement with where people are at. And like I said, there may be some prominent Democrats who do not endorse Mamdani, but they're going to identify themselves in the same kind of way. Edwin, you remember this from '83? Mm-hmm. Those Democrats who didn't endorse Harold Washington, right? Who didn't, even in the primary, right? There was folks who were with him, folks that weren't. And then in the general election, of course, there were folks that went against him. And boy, did they identify themselves, right? You knew who they were. And what I'm saying about that is that at a certain point in history, you don't have to be on the bandwagon from day one. It's totally legitimate to say I had to be convinced. But once you get to the point where it's logical to be convinced, if you still resist the future, I think you do yourself more harm than you do the candidate that you refuse to endorse.
Yes, we remember the people who stood in the schoolhouse gates. Yep.
That's right.
Yep. Yep.
And you just remember the people that weren't there where you needed them to be. And I can just give you one quick example. I think we probably got a minute left, maybe less. But, Bill Moyers just passed away. And Bill Moyers was one of the greatest communicators I could think of. And he was press secretary for Lyndon Johnson. And at a certain point, in the middle of Lyndon Johnson's term, he left. And as time went on, they said, why did you leave? And he said, we had become a war administration. We were focused on the Vietnam War. And I realized there wasn't anything more I was going to be able to do that was creative and dynamic and meaningful on the domestic front. Well, that's a real indictment powerful statement. And yet he was right, and he recognized it, right? He said it. And all I'm telling you is he had been very loyal to Lyndon Johnson. He had been Lyndon Johnson's kind of wingman. And then, at a certain point, he decided it was time to go. All I'm telling you is if you pay attention in politics, you realize when it's time to be on one side or the other. Yeah. And I think Mamdani's going to give us some of those types of choices as we go forward.
I think so too, and I wish him well. There's so much that I don't know from Chicago. There's, can he pay for the things he wants to pay for?
All of us don't know.
All of those are real problems. Yeah. I wish him nothing but the best, and hope that he is able to accomplish 3/4 of what he hopes to accomplish.
Look, I'll tell you this: he's a young man. He's going to evolve too.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
33-year-old. If a 33-year-old becomes mayor of New York, you can bet he's going to evolve. And in some ways that you like, maybe some ways you don't. But the bottom line is he's captured people's imagination, and we should be very careful about not paying attention when somebody rises up and captures people's imagination.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, look, as always, it's great to catch up. I appreciate our conversations. Listen, everybody, read John's stuff in the Cap Times, because Wisconsin is always important, and in the Nation about what's going on all over the country.
Thanks, brother. It's great to be on with you.
Great. Talk to you soon.
Take care, brother.
Bye. All right, folks, we can take a break for the news, and then Tom Bonier, sort of the guru of numbers, is going to join us when we come back.
You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. Tom Bonier is with us again. He is the CEO of TargetSmart, one of the most trusted research, analytic, and communications firms on the left. What does that mean? So I talk about this stuff. It's hard to explain sometimes. Well, among other things, it means if you're a donor, you want to know that Tom has helped your candidates target their media buys, because that means your contributions are going to be used more effectively. But that's just a tip of what it means. Tom, welcome back.
Thank you, Edwin.
Boy, I know you are super busy, so I really appreciate your taking the time to join us again.
Of course.
You and I last talked on the radio before the November cataclysm. And I know you've looked a lot at the data since then to get a better understanding of what we did right, what we did wrong. Can you just give us sort of a high-level view of that and what we might do better this time?
Yeah, it's really fascinating when you dig into the data, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it now, because it actually takes, believe it or not, several months to collect all of the publicly available data about who voted, who didn't vote. We've only just compiled all of that data now, and it's interesting because a pretty clear picture has come together, and it's maybe a little bit counterintuitive, because you'll remember immediately after the election, we were all looking at the results, and we were comparing how many votes President Biden got 2020 and Vice President Harris got, at least in the immediate count in the week or so after, and saying, well, look, it looks like there's about a 15 million vote difference. Did Democrats just stay home? Which was hard to believe. Well, the reality is now we know, no, that actually wasn't the case. And if you look at the battleground states, the 7 sort of top-tier states that decided the outcome of this election, the difference in turnout between Democrats and Republicans when you compare the 2020 winning Democratic electorate and the 2024 Trump electorate, the turnout differential was less than a point in favor of Republicans. So Democrats actually held their own in turnout. And so that intensity and enthusiasm that we were seeing, that we were talking about in the lead up to the election, it was all real, it was there. But this is the counterintuitive part, and I think it's indicative of, some challenges I think the Democratic Party needs to work on. is there just weren't enough Democrats and there were too many Republicans, meaning when you look at the new voter registration over the whole 4-year period of 2020 to 2024, Republicans just did a really good job of registering more new voters, where in all 7 of the battleground states, the Democratic share of registered voters decreased in all 7 of them. And that was a problem. So in the end, having that small turnout differential ended up being consequential enough just because there were more Republicans, so they accounted for a larger share of the electorate. And I want to say, after Vice President Harris became the nominee, and you and I talked about this last year, we actually did see big increases in Democratic registration.
I remember
the intensity
that.
and the enthusiasm was there. We saw it. Remember, we talked about the Taylor Swift and what happened when she went out and encouraged people to register to vote. You saw these big increases, but the reality is when we look at the 4-year period, what happened over those, 107 some odd days, it was just a little bit too little, a little bit too late. Republicans had run up the score enough in the previous 3.5 years, and Democrats just couldn't close the gap over that time period.
Yeah, that's so interesting and so important. I've always felt we Democrats run campaigns and we focus on candidates and we run elections, and the Republicans run a 24/7, 365 branding effort. And they don't okay, a campaign is part of it, but it's just part of it, and they do this all the time.
They do. And, in the end, what Republicans truly did is for many voters, they reshaped what they believed to be true. It wasn't just, to your point, campaign communication and what was being said when they knocked on the doors or served digital ads or made phone calls or sent mail. It was this echo chamber that they very successfully created over this long period of time. And it's interesting. If you look at the polling, and there's one poll I want to point you and your listeners to, is by a group called Navigator. It's a national poll. And they asked voters, it was right at Election Day, whether or not they had a favorable opinion of Donald Trump or not, and whether or not they approved of the job he did in his first term in office. And this is important because what we found is when you looked at just the swing voters in the 2024 election, a majority of them had an unfavorable opinion of Donald Trump, but a majority of them also thought he did a good job in his first term in office. So they have short memories, a lot of these voters. And because Republicans had litigated just the fundamental concept of truth, I think a lot of us thought that the 36 some odd felony convictions would be enough to disqualify Donald Trump, or January 6th, or just his failed track record in his first term in office would be enough. But a lot of people, let's face it, they don't pay very close attention to politics. And so what was filtering through to them was actually quite positive for Donald Trump. And, that was a big part of how he won as well.
Republicans have a sense, I think correctly, that you build majorities, and Democrats have been in the more technical business of trying to find them. And I think that's a loser's game.
That's right. That's right. And look, when you look at the last 8 years or so, you go back to 2016 and that election, you look at the midterm election in 2018 where Democrats actually did quite well and obviously won in 2020. Democrats have we've had our fair share of successes, but in retrospect, if we look at those areas where Democrats have had success, it's generally been sort of in the abstract of Republican failures, meaning it's been a lot of people coming out to vote against Donald Trump, against MAGA, to stop Republicans. But the Democratic brand does have issues at this point. There's not as many people who are proactively out supporting the Democratic Party. I think that gets to your point in terms of the difference between the parties and how Republicans have been able to win the elections they've won. I mean, they certainly have a smaller base of support, but it's incredibly loyal, and they've come out to vote when they needed them.
Yeah, well, I'm taking some comfort in your telling me that you can win by wanting to stop Donald Trump, because I think that is going to be a very strong feeling, maybe capable of uniting differing parts of a coalition.
Well, it's certainly true. Again, I mean, we saw that in 2018. We've seen that. We saw that in a number of states in 2022. Not everywhere, but in enough states, in the key states where it mattered. I do think the opportunity in front of Democrats at this point is to build on that anti-Trump, anti-MAGA majority, which we know exists, and build on top of that people who feel positive about the Democratic Party as a party who fights for and represents the values of a vast majority of Americans.
So how do we differentiate between represents the values of Americans versus standing for policies Americans like? Because on the latter, all the polling says Democrats do that.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And when you look around the country, and this is something I think has been very frustrating for Democrats, is you look at ballot initiatives in places like Florida and Missouri and Ohio, and places where Republicans are winning, by pretty substantial margins in the candidate campaigns. But when you look at their ballot initiatives on minimum wage, cannabis, abortion rights, overwhelming majority of the voters in those states are with the Democratic Party on those positions. And so that's been the question, is how do we as Democrats draw that connection between these electoral races where, the future of many of those issues are being decided and the actual votes they're casting. And, that has been a challenge, right? I think it's something where we as Democrats, we aren't always loud enough. We don't take enough credit for our successes. This is one that drives me crazy. But if you look back at these same Navigator polls and you look at their pre-election surveys in 2024, a plurality of Americans gave Donald Trump credit for President Biden's Infrastructure Act. Because Donald Trump talked about infrastructure. It became a joke among Democratic operatives. Is this week infrastructure week? Because for 4 years, Donald Trump said he was going to do something about infrastructure. And as we know, he didn't. And President Biden and Democrats did. But the sad truth is most Americans weren't aware of it.
Yeah, I think that Joe Biden was not able to do that late for the second half of his term, and that we paid a huge price for that, for sure. Tom, is some of this is the Democrats' inability to stand up and say what needs to be said. How much of the gap is down to the Republicans' ability to create moral panic over whatever their issue is in a particular moment? Because it shifts all the time. I think it's bathrooms, recently.
Well, that's what Republicans have been relying on. I mean, certainly, again, over the last 8 years, you can go back further than that, but Donald Trump is largely a one-trick pony when it comes to that, right? That he runs campaigns that are based on fear and anxiety. Unfortunately, as Democrats, when we aren't able to create that positive association and that positive branding where people view the Democratic Party proactively as a party who's fighting for people most in need, fighting for them, then attacks like that are able to seep in, and they are viewed as credible. And we saw a lot of them go unanswered in 2024, and that isn't the first time it's happened. I think where we can take some heart and some hope from what we've seen over the first 6 months of this year is that a lot of those attacks, the attacks on immigration, where they've been prominently deporting individuals who are citizens or who are otherwise here legally without due process. We've seen where Democrats have actually stood up and they fought for those individuals and they've put that on the front line. Because, to be clear, there are lots of people in the Democratic Party who have said these are distractions and we shouldn't be talking about these things. But the data shows when you look at the polling, when Chris Van Hollen went to Central America and to call attention to Abrego Garcia's unlawful deportation and detention, the polling changed. Suddenly, the President Trump's his support on immigration policy plummeted. So it's there for us.
It's there. I mean, when the Los Angeles Dodgers shut him out of Dodger Stadium, people were thrilled in Los Angeles.
That's right. That's right. Well, and it made attention. I think, You talk about the attention economy, and it is so challenging for Democrats to find ways just to get attention. So Donald Trump, if he's good at one thing, it's getting attention, and he's benefited from that. Again, I think Democrats made a mistake in 2024 where we thought we could sit back, we could run a more traditional campaign, and let Donald Trump disqualify himself. And that's not something you can count on in today's attention economy, because he knows how to manipulate it in his favor with these fear-based campaigns. And so hopefully the lesson that Democrats are learning now is you have to contest him in that. You can't let him have all the attention. He won't disqualify himself. But if we shine a light on the most egregious acts, voters will pay attention, and they don't like it. But we have to make sure that they're hearing about it.
So, right. So here's now trying to pass this bill today, and we'll spend the next few days trying to pass a piece of legislation that you know better than anybody has almost nothing in it that polls well.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and I think that's been the challenge for Democrats, is because there's been this argument among Democrats where some say, look, we should only be talking about literally the legislation. We should be talking about these unpopular cuts to the social safety and security network. And others are saying we need to sort of expand and talk about more. I'm certainly in the latter camp, but this bill affords Democrats ample opportunity to go out there and communicate with people in their communities about how Republicans are out there and they're voting to take things away from them that they need to survive. And for what? To give tax cuts to billionaires, apparently, and just to cut gratuitously. And I will say, to give them credit, I think there are a lot of Democrats and Democratic and progressive organizations who are out there doing that communication. I think we just need to get louder about it.
I mean, and you said for what? My answer when somebody says for what is, well, they're going to take money from you, from the American taxpayers, in order to fully cover for Jeff Bezos and his, the cost of his Venetian wedding.
And what an absurd visual that was over the last couple of days. I think I can think of no more perfect depiction of the dynamic in this country now between the haves and the have-nots and the widening gap. And so to have that happening at the same time as this big, ugly bill, couldn't be more perfect.
Right. And forgive me for thinking that had something to do with bombing Iran 6 days after Israel said it's not a threat anymore. Or 6 days after they said it, they set back their nuclear program. Yeah.
Well, there certainly was a certain amount of theater involved in what happened there, and I agree. I think it was mostly geared towards distractions.
Hey, are there ads running? I just don't know this because I live in Illinois, in red states that are calling attention to voters about some of the horrors in this bill?
There are. There are a lot of groups out there that are actually doing good work on that front, not just in red states, but in red areas of competitive states. This morning I was speaking with a large gathering of Democrats and progressives in Virginia who are focused on the elections they have this year, and gubernatorial elections and state legislative elections, and talking to people who are organizing in the rural communities, specifically talking about these cuts and how they're going to hurt these communities, focusing on a lot of these voters who didn't come out in 2024, maybe haven't even come out in the last few elections, and really driving home the negative impact that these cuts will have. Again, to break through the noise out there that is so noisy. A lot of voters still aren't aware of this bill, or they don't know what's really in there. So to hear about people doing this in red states and in the red portions of competitive states is uplifting. It's exactly what needs to be happening now, really, around the country.
Let's talk about how people learn and hear about things. I have worried for, a few cycles at least, that the financial incentives for, frankly, campaign consultants is to put ads on TV, and maybe more than is effective. I think that the world has changed in the communications world. How are you finding the best ways to get message out and communicate? are TV ads like important like they used to be? Is it a different world? How do we think about that?
Not nearly. I mean, you think about this New York City mayoral election. New York, the media market covers a good portion of the state outside the city, a good portion of Connecticut, and the whole northern half of New Jersey. And so if you're on TV,
right, so an ad costs a fortune.
Yes, and also, that was a primary election where many of the people in the city wouldn't have even voted, and so that's a great example of the inefficiencies of this mode of communication. I'll tell you, our team at TargetSmart, you mentioned the work we do. We build a national voter file of every individual voter, and over the time since the company began in 2006, the way we need to communicate with voters and the information we need to collect has evolved. It used to be you just had to have the correct address for someone so you could send a piece of mail to them or knock on the door, and then it was a phone number or a cell phone number or an email address, and now it's digital targeting. Our team built out an actual digital platform that allows campaigns to go directly from the voter file to find the voters they want on the voter file with all the models we have and all the information we have on the individuals, and then serve those ads directly to those individuals wherever they are on the internet. And it's become, this is the cutting edge. Certainly digital targeting and digital advertising has been around for a long time, but this level, the level of transparency and accuracy and actually being able to target people online is the cutting edge. And so, you're going to see a lot more of that. You'll see a lot more of accountability in that space. And that's what it's about.
I don't even think it's just ads. I mean, I have been sometime advisor to Courier Newsroom, and what they do, and the idea of taking voter file, if you will, and targeting individuals just with news stories to help them understand what's going on is enormously impactful.
Well, that gets back to what, there's an interesting, again, I hate to cite so much polling, but me, it's what I live in. And another poll from the post-election survey from 2024 showed, they asked people how much attention they pay to, quote, the news. And they ranked it from a lot to none at all, and the 4 or 5 points in between. And what they found, perhaps not surprisingly, was that there was a direct correlation between how someone answered that question and whether they voted for Harris or for Trump. And so those who paid the most attention gave Vice President Harris the widest margins, and Donald Trump won by solid double digits among people who say they pay no attention at all. And so, to your point, it's incumbent upon us to make sure, they might not be watching the evening news. They might not be going, let's be honest, they're not going to NewYorkTimes.com. But if we can burst into those bubbles for a moment and provide them with some reporting that is actually reporting on the facts in a way that doesn't feel like news and doesn't feel preachy, that's how we're going to break through. And so, people are doing that, and we just need to do more of it.
Yeah, and paywalls are a difficult problem here. I mean, because lies are cheaper to produce than real news, or you have to actually pay reporters.
Well, they spread faster.
Complicated problem, and they spread faster for sure. So, have you seen any data on the impact of the protests, the No Kings and things like that? And I mean the impact. I guess what I mean is the impact on the people protesting.
Yeah, I'm eager to dig into it. The voter registration data lags a bit, meaning if someone went out and they were at one of those protests and they decided to register to vote, I think there was voter registration happening all around the country as part of these protests.
Yeah, I didn't see that in Chicago, but yeah.
Well, we will. If that happened, we'll see it in the voter registration data, but it takes states. It depends. It can take days, weeks, or in some cases a couple of months. So, I will tell you as a cautionary tale here, even though we know President Trump's popularity is plummeting and he's historically unpopular and weak for an incumbent at this point in his presidency, we're not yet seen that benefit Democrats in terms of these voter registration numbers. So Republicans are still outpacing Democrats in voter registration, which to me just, again, speaks to the need to make sure that we're communicating around the Democratic brand and people understand that the Democratic Party is a vehicle for justice and for fighting back against these regressive cuts. People aren't quite seeing that yet, but again, the voter registration data lags behind. So we're talking about data from maybe back in May. I'll be very eager to look at that data that comes around over the last couple of weeks that we've seen.
Oh my gosh! Will you write about that? Will it be on your website? Because I'm terrified by the thought that the GOP is still outperforming us in new registrations. Particularly since they're also outperforming, if we can call it performing, us in kicking people off the ballot.
Yeah, no, that's right. And yes, I will be writing about it. I will be sharing about it, and I'd be happy to come back on with you and talk about it when we have that data. Look, there are two elements of this. There's the mechanical part of the work they're doing, the blocking and tackling in the states and doing the voter registration. That's always been Democrats and progressives' strong suit, but I have to say Republicans over the last 4 years have outpaced Democrats, and we need to get back to our roots and invest in that again. But that said, the Republican brand is overwhelmingly unpopular. And so in these elections, these special elections, you're still seeing Republicans underperform. My point here is Democrats can do even better by making the positive case. The negative case, I think most voters are sold on. They don't believe in what Republicans are doing. But because Republicans are out there and they're registering voters, they're able to blunt that a little bit. We have an opportunity to beat them in the field at the doors, as we always have in the past. We just have to do the work.
Yeah, and your insight about message certainly got a boost in the New York mayoral primary, where there was some fear campaigns, and then there was a sort of a joyous, here's what we can do together campaign. And it seemed to matter a lot.
Yeah, that's one where I'll be very interested in getting the vote history. Again, it'll take a while to get it to see who voted. The early signs are a lot of people who maybe otherwise wouldn't vote in a primary did come out. That looks like, certainly in the early vote, you had more younger voters coming out. So, I think there's some early signs that what you would think would be the case. So we can make that positive case to voters. If they feel like there's something they can connect to, they're going to come out and vote for it.
Okay. Well, as always, Tom, it's fascinating catching up with you and, getting, just your news about the data, but your views about the data, which are really so important. And I hope we learn from them.
So do I. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on and have the conversation.
All right. If somebody just, wants to find your work, are you still posting on Substack, or should they go to the Target Smart website?
Yeah, I haven't been on Substack as much just because, it's this point in the cycle where things are a little bit slower to come in, but I will begin now as things are heating up and we have primary elections and special elections. So I'll be on there more. You can find me on Blue Sky, T-Bonnier. Yep. I'm pretty easy to find.
You are. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. All right, everybody. Boy, are we lucky to be getting this kind of information. Hey, look, take a break and your calls when we come back.
Edwin Eisendrath is taking your calls now at 773-763-9278. The Big Picture is on now. WCPT 820.
Okay, Jim, kick us off.
Hi, Edwin. I was listening to an interview from a young American doctor in Gaza. He signed his 20th death certificate, and that was mid-afternoon. He fears for his sanity. What he's saying there, he fears for his sanity. But that despotic situation there is translated to the continental United States. We have people, unidentified people, throwing people in bands that don't even know what they are, bringing them undisclosed locations, and with no trial, et cetera, which I never thought I'd see in American soil. But it reminds me of a security guard in a candy store. And he suspects these adolescents of stealing a candy bar. So what he does is he doesn't identify himself as a security guard. He just picks the kid up by the waist, throws him into a van, and takes him off to some facility where his parents don't know where he's at, and for fear of their logic is for fear of recrimination. Well, all I have to say is, if you fear recrimination, don't take the job. Don't take the job. Do you follow me, Edwin?
I think I do follow you. In Gaza, I think you have young and exhausted soldiers who are, tired of 600 and some days of deployments, and I understand the IDF opened a war crimes investigation this week because they're worried that their own troops are doing things that could be unconscionable.
But everybody knows $30 million. They got some shadow operation. Who knows? It's probably Peter Keel and somebody else. UNICEF is trying to get in there. They have professionals in this area that can't get in, and they can't believe they can't get in. But I don't want to go into that. It's just a tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. But this idea that you could throw people into prison and take them hundreds and hundreds of miles away, or maybe 1,000 miles away. I mean, how about
what we're doing here? What we're doing here? Unconscionable.
They beat a guy up in front of an IHOP. Now, I'm telling you the truth. If I walked out of that restaurant and I saw 7 people pounding on a guy, I would jump in. Because I've always jumped in all my life. I fought plenty of times when I was outnumbered. But I'm not going to sit around and watch some guy being plummeted to death by 7 masked men. So this is going to end up in terrible violence the way this is going. I don't know how this can go on for 4 years. I have no idea. Because sooner or later the Marines are going to have to shoot somebody, or the National Guard they have to shoot somebody. And it's Louis XVI all over again. Anyway,
how would you feel about an amendment? How would you feel? Look, to amend the Illinois Constitution, the state legislature has to vote on it first. It's not like other states. They have to vote on it with 3/5 majorities in both houses, but then it goes before voters. So let's just say that the legislature got its act together and put on the ballot an amendment to the Illinois Constitution in our Bill of Rights that said, look, you know what? You can't go after people if you are masked and not wearing a badge. Would you vote for that? I would.
That's the sane way to do it. And another sane way, I didn't understand this ranked choice voting, but now that the success that they had in New York, and the Irish have had it for 100 years since they won their independence. 100 years they've had it. And they're happy with it. And they're the 7th leading democracy in the world, and America has fallen down to about 40th. And we used to export democracy, I recall. So this ranked choice voting, I'd like to see that on the ballot also, because it was explained on Jones' show, and at first blush, I was like, well, this sounds complicated. It was hard to get voters out anyway. But this one, I think you understand it. But anyway, just a couple of suggestions. That's a terrific suggestion. That should be on the ballot immediately. I do not believe in that. Anyway, thank you, buddy. Have a good week, Bill.
You too, Paul.
Yeah, well, Edwin, after your last guest, I was already kind of in a Democratic bashing mood, but after the last half hour, I really am now. I guess I'm so frustrated and angry about what's happening to the country right now that is absolutely unnecessary, and there should not even exist a Republican Party like this, a MAGA party. It reminds me, the Democrats play politics like my old Detroit Lions used to play football. They are reliably snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And it just sounds like it's the same old in the party. It's all about seniority, it's my turn, results. And I think what happens is if there are, a few percentage of swing voters, and they're kind of populist in the way that they don't want to be associated with a loser. And if you snatch defeat from the jaws of victory all the time, you're seen as a loser. I've had exchanges with people on Facebook who are Trump supporters who say, the Democrats are stupid enough to let Trump win. And I said, well, wait, what are you arguing now? It's just like people get angry with the Democrats for their lack of efficacy. And we have this new party, this Ken Martin. I get emails from him every day. I'm sorry. You know, we had Barack Obama was a tremendously popular president, but the head of the DNC, Deborah Wasserman Schultz, was terrible. Absolutely the worst thing that ever happened. And we're still going down this road. We're not registering Democrats. Why? There should. And I get really angry. Oh, your earlier guest said, well, one of the things is the Democrats didn't hold a primary. Yeah, that was a problem because it wasn't so much a problem that they didn't hold a primary, but then they didn't hold a primary and then forced the main candidate out. and in favor of, and did they really do any research about can a black woman win in this country even? Donald Trump has shown that he can beat two women, a white woman and a black woman, but he can't beat a man. And that's, unfortunately, that's still the way the politics is in this country. People are still too set in their ways with regard to that. They call it identity politics. They want to play that problem, but that's their problem. That's really not Democrats. And the people who whine about Democrats don't put any policy solutions forward. Yes, they do. That's all that Kamala Harris talked about. Donald Trump didn't put any policies. But so how can you possibly lose to that? That's what makes me angry. And now people don't realize we have what we have because of that. Because of it's not that we don't have good policies. We have terrible messaging, uninspired messaging that just, I get emails from Hakeem Jeffries and Jen Martin every day, and I go, I just delete them now. I don't even read them because they're not inspiring. They do not have fire. They do not come with fire at a time when we need fire. We're coming down to we're losing because the federal government, the courts, and the courts, all three branches have abandoned the Constitution, have they not?
We have a Constitution on fire for sure. It's not doing its job, and it's been party captured. The three branches together, as opposed to being independent. So that's really dangerous for sure. I think there are Democrats out there who are plenty long on fire, and I think you'll see more and more as the election gets closer, and you have candidates out there who are more and more on fire. I agree with you that I haven't seen enough. I've seen some in Congress, but again, the thing that Tom Bonnier noted is that we have a tough time getting attention for it. A very tough time getting attention for
Well, you know, I worked on a campaign for a radio talk show host here in Seattle, Dave Ross, in 2004, and his campaign manager was one of these, I know what I'm doing. He's a 23-year-old kid who just graduated from college, and he makes suggestions to him, and he was just like, no, that's not the way you do it. That's not the way you do it. And we got our butts handed to us. And there was no reason for it. There was no reason for it. It was 55-45. We lost to the King County, the former King County Sheriff, Dave Reichert, and it shouldn't have been close, but it was handled so badly. It was just like, no, you know what you're doing? No, I guess you don't, because that was a blowout. So, well,
I have some sympathy. You know, I lost running against a crook. Stuff happens.
Okay. I'm preaching to the choir, I guess. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay,
all right,
thanks,
Paul. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, as always. All right, Earl, you're next.
Hi, Edwin. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm well.
That's great. I hope you and your family have a wonderful weekend, and I'm glad we finally have summer.
We do have summer.
The reason why I called, and I want to try to make 2 points. I thought your last guest sort of might have indicated whether we still have voter registration problems, whether the Republican Party in the swing states is throwing out a disproportionate number of Democratic voters with surnames that may indicate that they might be minorities. And the other thing was the Supreme Court ruling that is making it more difficult for voters, babies will have to prove that some kind of jumping the hoops. The parents would have to go through jumping the hoops to make sure that they are registered as American citizens. Now, the Supreme Court didn't really take on and throw out American citizenship if you're born here in America. They just made it more difficult by making you have to go through extra processes. You have to go through the court to show that you are an American citizen, and that's really horrible. And I just don't know how our messaging, just like Paul just said, can get any better if people are tone deaf to messaging. I mean, it's something that has to be innate in, it's like an inertia. Either you have the ability to recognize good messaging slogans, or you don't. And Democratic Party seems to be tone deaf, and like you said, they don't like to beat their own horn like Joe Biden did. He didn't claim his victory, so the Republicans claimed it. Republicans were,
but they were real victories. They were real.
Republicans were taking credit for things.
They were absolutely right. Showing up at bridges that they voted against when the ribbon was cut.
Right.
Yep. We needed to do more, and I think that lesson had better be learned. I hope it's going to be learned. I mean,
hope so too.
Every time I hear this, I want to go out and campaign, because I think it would just be so much fun to talk about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, and talk about what these clowns have done to us. Oh my God, I would love to be out there doing that.
Now, can you imagine Mitch Connolly saying that they'll get over it when they lose their Medicaid?
Yes, I can imagine it. Of course, I can imagine it.
But I mean, we're not making any heyday out of it.
Yeah.
I don't hear Democrats beating that drum until it's blue in the face, but Republicans would be making big heyday out of this kind of stuff.
Well, they're planning on taking $1 trillion out of American health care in order to pay for Jeff Bezos' wedding.
Yeah, out of the poorest people, the people that can least afford it. And we got to realize some of our suffrage members are on food stamps and Medicaid because they don't make enough money when they are enlisted into the armed services. It's a shame.
No,
it cuts across the board.
It's all going away. They'll take people's food away, but make sure they have a gun. Yeah, it's really smart, these guys. That's who they are.
Or, like you said, have a wonderful Venetian wedding.
Yeah, right. All right, Earl, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Glad you're part of this conversation. All right, let's head south to Florida. Eduardo?
Yeah, Edwin. I'm glad we're not talking about the wedding in Italy, which I don't care about. But
yeah, but you're going to end up paying for it.
Yeah. Taking a break from national news here, Jose Adolfo Macias, nicknamed Fido, he's a Ecuadorian drug king, and they found him in a luxury home in a hole. And so the government took him back to the capital, so he's going to stand trial. So this is good news. So I'm glad to see a country like that being aggressive in getting these people, and they don't have to depend on, say, the U.S., to get some of their baddies. So this is good news to hear.
Yeah, great news.
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't know that story.
Edwin.
I appreciate that. Thanks. All right, Brian.
Hi, Edwin. Hope you're doing well. I was watching C-SPAN 2, and the first in the Senate, the first votes will be coming up momentarily on this big, ugly bill. And I wanted to say that Chuck Schumer said that overnight the Republicans made changes to make it even more austere and against the poor. And I was disgusted when the Supreme Court essentially defunded Planned Parenthood, even though at least 90% of Planned Parenthood has nothing to do with abortion. They didn't even care if it had to do with abortion. They just wanted to defund it. Your thoughts, Edwin?
Yes, I agree with you. And it's worse than that, because what the ruling was actually about who has standing to sue in a civil rights case. And in this case, Planned Parenthood wanted to sue a state for changing their Medicare rules to cut them out, saying they violated their equal protection rights. And they were told they didn't even have standing to bring that suit. And this is the first step. And if you read Clarence Thomas's dissent, he wrote his own concurrence. If you read it, he's saying, we should really walk away from the ability of individuals to have a private right of action to enforce civil rights laws in America. So Planned Parenthood is the tip of the spear, but they are really going after civil rights and the ability to of people to protect themselves and their rights in America. It's stunning, and Planned Parenthood is their first victim, but not their last.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. And, I know. We have to win.
And
we have to win.
Yes, and this business of throwing up to 16 million people, if not more, off of Medicaid, and then they'll be coming after Medicare. I don't know what they expect all these people to do for health.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Mitch McConnell said it. Get over it. That's expects people to, people will die. And what do you care? Kennedy's going to make vaccines. He's already said, we're going to make the flu vaccine more difficult. Parents are going to watch their kids die. That's the country we're heading to because of these people. That's not crazy talk. Those are just, you have to look reality in the eye. Anyway, Brian, I really appreciate your calling. I got a couple more I'm going to squeeze in before we're done.
Thank you, Edwin.
You bet. Cynthia, you're next.
Hi. Gosh, thank you. It's been a while since I've called in. I am a little, I don't even know how to say this, like a little confused and disgusted. My daughter is adopted from China. When we were in China, President Bill Clinton put out a thing where he said all children who were adopted from out of the country by people who were citizens were automatically citizens. So at the time, I did not have to readopt her for $8,000 in this country. But now it's, her birth certificate from China is 4 pages long. She does have an American passport. She does have, a relevant, driver's license. But it kind of makes me nervous that what is the next step with the people who are, birthright citizens? And I just don't know. I'm just very tightly wound about this. And she's 27 years old now. She's an attorney, but some of her friends are attorneys, and they are in the middle of all this, birthright and, are you citizens? And, so her friends are helping these people, but I'm nervous for her and all of these people.
This is a very important question. Cynthia, I'm glad you raised it. My recollection is that it was during the Clinton administration we passed the Child Citizenship Act, which effectively said foreign-born children who meet certain conditions automatically become citizens. That can be repealed. I don't think you can repeal the citizenship of someone once they've got it, although this administration is talking about denaturalization, stripping people of citizenship. So you're absolutely right. This is going to end up litigated through the courts, and the Supreme Court is probably not going to step in and make a decision. They're just going to say, well, the president has an executive order denaturalizing people, and we'll hear the case sometime in the future. But right now, we're not going to let anybody stay that decision. what they did this last week was give the president to do whatever he wants, pending some long arc where it finally gets to them and they can decide otherwise. No judge can stay him. So you're right to worry. I'm sorry. You're right to worry.
Well, are you still online? I can't hear you.
Yes. Oh.
Well, I told her, you need to carry your passport. You need to carry your citizenship papers with you. Because, she's in downtown Chicago, and, he has sent troops to the city, and she's Asian, and it's like, they already went through Chinatown and, stripped people of their citizenship and, dragged them out before they even came to Chicago. So I am just I don't even know what to do for her. Like I said, she's a litigator. And she's so smart and she's so wise. And
yeah. Well, Cynthia, my heart bleeds for you and for her and for everybody in this position. The honest answer about she sounds like she's got her head on straight, and she will avail herself of all the remedies that are out there to protect herself. But the real answer is we have to throw out of power the people who are aiming to hurt your daughter. That's just we have to throw them out.
But it's even when COVID happened, he was in between undergrad and law school, and he worked for, I shouldn't say, but he worked downtown, and she would be out on the street going to maybe dinner with her coworkers. People would spit on her, like, take your COVID disease back to China. I just don't even know what to do. But I can't help her. She can stand up for herself. But I just want people to know that this is like a serious thing. That people who are trying to contribute to society and who are citizens are in jeopardy. That's all.
And there's a lot of hate. Just indiscriminate hate, and there's no place for it. We have to push it back. Cynthia, I got one more caller I'm going to squeeze in, but thank you so much. I appreciate it. And Roosevelt, you're gonna ring us out.
Double E, thanks for taking my call. Hey, listen. So did you see the video from Dade County, Florida? The two young ladies that were dragged because they were, they spoke out of turn. Did you see it?
No.
You gotta see it. You gotta see it. They were dragged out of there because they talked out of turn, just like Senator Padilla. Same thing, same principle. One was white and one was black. They were just inquiring how much it's gonna cost, or where's the money gonna come from that alligator Alcatraz. I don't know if that's what it's called. So can you believe that we're living in a country where a state run by Mussolini over there is doing the things that he's doing, shutting people's mouths, not letting them express themselves, no First Amendment, and let's not forget, not far behind or maybe ahead is Texas. Now these guys that are what I'm referring to as governors, the Republican governors, they're eager to please Trump as far as the cruelty that's going on, and they're copying the cruelty that was going on in L.A. and California, to be specific. So what do you think about that? You believe what we're living? You got to see that video. I'm going to send it to you.
I will look it up as soon as we're done. But look, this is wanton cruelty and very fascist tendencies. The alligator Alcatraz that's being built that we taxpayers are going to pay for in order to house tens of thousands of supposedly people who are here in violation of their visas, but who knows really, because there isn't due process and there isn't this. We don't have a justice system because of our courts, the Supreme Court, that will assure that people get the justice they're entitled to. And that worries me a lot. But equally, I'm worried about the money we're spending contracting in these international gulag system for jails in countries that nobody will travel to. I mean, we're going to have jails in Somalia and in the seacoast where they've already sent people. I mean, this is unprecedented, dangerous time.
And Double E, speaking of due process, did Abrego Garcia ever get due process? Because I understand they're going to fly him somewhere. I don't know where anymore. I lose track of all these things that Trump is dictating. So did he ever get due process?
No, but he got returned home from that place, which Trump said would never happen. And now they're going to try and say they charge him with things they're not going to get away with. By the way, look at his hands. They're not tattooed. Trump used the Oval Office to lie again. All right, that's got to be our last word. Thank you all. I'm not here next week, but we'll have someone sitting in. It'll be a good show, and I will see you in 2 weeks. You take care.